Most coaches treat webinar promotion as an announcement. They send a few emails or post an Instagram story, then they wait. And when only 40 people show up, they assume the webinar funnel needs work, but that is the wrong diagnosis. The webinar was never full enough to determine if it actually worked. Filling a live webinar isn't about having a huge following or posting more content. It is about having a promotional strategy that runs weeks before the webinar date, and most coaches do not have that. In this video, I'm walking through what a real webinar promotional strategy looks like, the registration page, and how to know if it's all working properly. Let's get into it. Now let's talk about why most coaches cannot fill a webinar. Most coaches cannot fill a webinar for the same three reasons. And the first one is not enough promotion. Most coaches start promoting 48 hours before the webinar date. Registrations require multiple touch points over time, and 48 hours does not give you enough time. Reason number two is no urgency. A post with a link that gives no reason to act now will have trouble converting the audience. People see it and they think they can register later, and they end up forgetting. No deadline, no follow-up, nothing to push them to register now and not later. Number three is wrong diagnosis. When a webinar underperforms, the presentation usually gets the blame. Coaches rewrite the slides, run it again, and then they get the same result because the problem was never the presentation or the webinar funnel itself. You cannot get a real read or real data on anything if the webinar did not have a proper promotional strategy. The reason for this is because you might assume that the presentation is off. You might assume that the webinar funnel has a problem. It could be the registration page, it could be the follow-up sequences, or the post-webinar sequence. You might think that some of these, components are the ones that are lacking, but you can't actually tell because you need to understand that if not enough people even registered and not enough people even showed up, you don't have enough data. You don't know if the presentation is even good or bad. You have no idea because you just don't have enough traffic to know if the webinar funnel needs improvement or needs changes, right? So it's very important that you nail down the promotional strategy first so that you have a real idea of whether your webinar is good or it needs work. For example, let's say you get 40 attendees instead of 500. It is not a webinar funnel problem. It is a promotional problem. You're not getting enough people to register and to show up to the webinar. Before you promote a webinar, you need to understand what exactly you are selling. People do not register simply to attend webinars and to get a free training and a free masterclass. There's a more, deeper reason to why they sign up and why they show up. They register for specific outcomes. The difference between a webinar that gets 50 registrants and one that gets 500 is usually the title. If you title it Business Growth Masterclass, it's going to get ignored. But if you talk about how I went from 10K to 50K a month without running more ads or posting more content, it's going to get clicks. It's the same content, but it's a completely different registration rate just because the title and the topic seem so much more appealing. The promotional strategy has one job: sell the webinar, the specific result the viewer is going to walk away with if they attend the webinar. Most coaches promote way too broadly. They talk about growing a business, scaling income, or building systems, and no one feels like this is specifically made for them, and they can't see the appeal or the reason why they have to attend. And when your audience doesn't feel personally addressed, the registration also stays very low. So you need to find a way to test different titles. You need to make sure that the title speaks to your ideal customer avatar. The test is very simple. Take the webinar title or the core promise and post it as an organic hook on a piece of content. If it gets engagement, the page will convert. And if it does not, that means you have to keep testing titles and webinar topics before you build the page. So that's like one really easy way to test whether the title or the topic of your webinar is actually going to get people to engage and people interested, is by talking about it in content. It could be Instagram stories, Instagram reels, or even YouTube videos. And once you know this topic or this specific outcome that you're promising gets engagement and it's appealing to your audience, then you can create a webinar around this because it's going to get people interested in showing up and actually buying the product at the end of the webinar. So make sure that you test your titles and your topic before you make an entire webinar presentation around this piece of content, around this title, without knowing if it's going to work or not. Now let's talk about the registration page. The registration page has one job: make registering feel like the obvious next step. The headline is 80% of the conversion. It must state three things: what the viewer gets, who is it for, and why now. If the headline doesn't answer these three questions, the page will not convert. You also want to add social proof. Right below the headline and the registration form, you want to talk about who has already bought, what result they got, and why this person should trust you. Another important thing to know is that the registration form should be close to the top. Every additional scroll costs you registrants. You don't want to make a registration page where the form is all the way in the bottom and they have to scroll a lot in order to be able to even register for the webinar. You want to make it very easy and very simple for them to register. Below 10% conversion rate means that there's a problem with the page. It's not a promotional problem. It just means that you have to improve the registration page before you drive more traffic. You want to fix the page because sending more traffic to a broken page will not work regardless of what your promotional strategy is. The page is the foundation that you build everything on top of. Now let's talk about the promotion timeline. Most coaches run a 48-hour promotional window. That is not a campaign, that's an announcement. A real promotion timeline is 14 to 21 days. It runs in 3 phases. Phase 1 is whisper. Days 1 through 7, you hint that a live event is coming, but you don't share any details. You just build curiosity and desire around the problem that you solve. The goal is to prime your audience so that once the registration opens, they're already interested because they've already heard the problem that you're going to solve with the webinar before you even told them that there's going to be a webinar. Phase 2 is tease. Days 7 through 14, you reveal the webinar date, what you will teach, and who it is for. You drop social proof and you open registration. Your audience has been primed and nurtured for an entire week, and this is where you open the registration and you start letting people register for the webinar they're going to hold. Phase 3 is shouts. The final 72 hours, you want to do heavy promotion. Every email and every post directly to the registration page with a date and a time and what they're going to get if they attend the webinar. The majority of registrations happen in this window. If you're not promoting heavily in those last 72 hours, you're missing the highest intent window in the entire promotional campaign. Now let's talk about email, which is your highest converting registration channel. If you have an email list that you're not using to fill your webinars, you're not taking advantage of your highest converting asset. An email list will consistently outperform your social media audience for webinar registration because your list signed up to hear from you and you built a relationship with them over a longer period of time. Typically, the people on your email list are, bigger fans of your content. They know more about your offer. They're, more interested in, getting weekly or even daily emails from you. So they tend to be more of a, warmer audience on the email list as opposed to, someone that just followed you on Instagram maybe last week or a month ago. So it's very important that you leverage your email list because that's one of the fastest and easiest ways to get a lot of people to register. Now let's talk about the promotional email sequence, which runs a minimum of 4 to 6 emails from the moment the registration opens until the webinar day. Email number 1 is announcement. It's what the webinar is, who is it for, and why they should register now. Email number 2 is the problem. Agitate the pain that the webinar will solve. Email number 3 is proof, a case study, a result, or a transformation story that makes the webinar feel credible and worth attending. Email number 4 and 5 are going to be urgency emails. You want to make them know that there's going to be limited spots and the registration is closing. Email number 6 is day of reminder. It's the last chance. The webinar is today. Here's the link. If you do not have an email list, filling up your webinars will be harder and slower, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. This means that the other channels will have to work harder. The key to organic social promotion is seeing the problem before the registration opens. For 1 to 2 weeks before registration, your content should be about the problem your webinar solves. By the time you post a registration link for your webinar, your audience already wants the solution. When promoting your webinar through organic social, you want to have 1 CTA per post. When the webinar promotion is live, do not split your attention between the webinar and anything else. You want to make sure that you funnel your entire traffic from your organic audience to your webinar. You don't want to link them to your VSL or to another one of your funnels. You want to really focus on the webinar funnel and drive all the traffic possible to this webinar funnel. Now let's talk about paid traffic. Paid traffic is an amplifier. It scales what already works. It does not fix what is broken. Do not run cold paid traffic to an unproven webinar. Validate the funnel with organic first. If the registration page is not converting or the offer is not resonating, paid traffic will not fix that problem. Before you run cold traffic, you should start with running retargeting ads. People who have already seen your content convert at a higher rate than cold audiences. When you run cold traffic, it requires your registration page to be converting above 10% before you spend any money. If the page is below that, fix the registration page. Test it with your organic audience. Keep improving the title, keep improving the copy on the page, keep testing things until you find a page that actually converts your audience. And then once you have this, that's when you start promoting paid traffic to it. Now, cost per registrant is a very important metric to track here. Above $15 in the coaching info space means that the registration page or the ads are performing poorly. Budget starting point should be $100 to $200 per day. Scale only when the cost per registrant is within the benchmark and the funnel is converting. Now let's look at the confirmation sequence because getting someone to register is not the same as getting them to show up. Most coaches send one confirmation email, and that's not a real show up system. The confirmation sequence runs from the moment someone registers to the day of the webinar. Immediate confirmation after registration, 2 to 3 reminder emails in the days that follow, a day before reminder, and a day of reminder. Each email has one job. Remind them why they registered, not just the date and time, but the specific outcome they signed up for. A weak confirmation sequence means a low show up rate regardless of how strong the promotional strategy was. It's very important that once you promoted your webinar, once you ran as much traffic as possible to your registration page and you have your ads dialed in, you still have to have a confirmation sequence, because if not, people are going to register, but your registrant to show up or to attendee rate is going to be very low. So you need to optimize the promotional strategy, but you cannot neglect or forget about the confirmation sequence, because that's what actually gets those people who registered to actually show up and to attend the webinar. Now, here's how you know if your promotional strategy is working. Every metric in your promotional system points to a specific stage. For example, registration rate on email sends. Low registration rate means that the subject line or the offer or the way that you're conveying your program or the webinar to the audience on the email list, it's not appealing, it's not, drawing their attention. That's why you get low registration rate. Next is the landing page conversion rate. Below 10% means that the registration page is not performing. The traffic is there, but the registration page is not converting it. Now, calls for registrant on paid traffic. Like I said, above $15 means that the ad to page combination is not working. Either the page is not converting or the ads are not performing. Next, we have show up rate. If registrants are not showing up, the promotion created the wrong expectation, or the confirmation sequence is underperforming or not working properly. Each of these numbers points to a specific part of the promotional system that is broken. Find the metric that needs improvement and fix that stage, and the whole system is going to improve. Now that you know exactly what part of your system is broken, the question is whether you're going to fix it. If you're making $30,000 or more, you have an audience, and you have a proven offer, this is exactly what we fix. We look at your current setup, identify where the registrations are falling off, and we build the webinar system correctly for you. Done for you. We handle every component. You just show up and present the webinar presentation. Now, make sure that you book a call in the description below. And one other thing that I would like to say is that building out this entire, webinar funnel is very time intensive and it requires a lot of attention to detail. I need to fully understand your niche, your market, your coaching program, and your offer in detail in order to make sure that this entire funnel is dialed in. And once you introduce, paid traffic, it requires even more work to make sure that the ad creatives are actually hitting and they're performing well. So again, I can only take on a certain amount of coaches every single month, because even though I have virtual assistants, team members, and AI tools to help me accelerate this process, do the research, and produce a better, output for you, it still requires a lot of attention. So again, if you want to work with me, make sure that you book a call in the description below, because I can only take a certain amount of coaches every single month. So if you want to talk about potentially implementing this into your coaching and info business, make sure that you book a call and we could talk more.